one of the challenges I think in teaching this is that there's been so much, I guess, propaganda or miseducation about the movement, and this tendency to, although it's important to acknowledge the bombing of the Rainbow Warrior, sometimes that there's extra emphasis on that, and there's the idea that the New Zealand government stepped in and saved the Pacific from nuclearism, and I just have to acknowledge your work on this kaupapa and many others of just cutting through those lies and putting the truth in front of our people. You talked about having to kind of sneak into the student union building and run the press yourselves in the middle of the night and having mates that would go back and change the numbers so it looked like you'd never been there. One of the documents that we found amongst your records was around when you, Marco, you might be able to help me here. There was Hilda was able to cut through. So could you share that?
When the Treaty of Rarotonga was signed in 1985, it was described as a Clayton's nuclear-free zone. It was the nuclear-free zone you were having when you weren't having a proper nuclear-free zone, in the same way as a popular non-alcoholic beverage at the time. It's because it doesn't ban the passage or the storage of nuclear bombs in the Pacific. And so Hilda, Pacific People's Anti-Nuclear Action Committee, released an action alert at the time which said, acknowledge those in the island Pacific who at that moment were not nuclear free, not substantively, and accused the Longi government of selling out the Pacific. And Mairi also appeared on a documentary and said the same thing. Yeah, and
do you have a question for Hilda around that?
Question.
Can't even remember.
Oh,
It's all right.
you did it. It was great.
I think just for the oral history component, it would be nice to hear about, how you organized the first Pacific People's, the first Tui Oranga,
Oh gosh. Just talking about the Rainbow Warrior. For us, it was about infiltration. That was the mother of that movements got infiltrated. We were infiltrated on Hikoi to Waitangi, and I know for Elaine Shaw, that was one of the hardest thing for her to swallow, was that this woman, Dominique Prieur, had come in as a volunteer, been in her house, ate in her house, friendly, for over 6 months before all of this happened. So, and I remember when I met Marco, and then I realised, I thought, well, I'm going to give this to this young man because he's a new generation, he's keen, nobody else is coming forward. I knew about Haneati, but I thought, she doesn't seem to, she's doing something else. And then later I said, so what's your background? Can anyone verify you? I mean, there was just an old habit. Because we had been...
You might do that.
Yeah. So, for us in the movement, it was actually about being infiltrated by people who were stirrers. What's the other words? Provocateurs. Starts fights over nothing because that was their role to play. And, on one of the Waitangi Hikoi, we had an undercover cop who fingered everyone that got arrested in Hitaua. So, we had some really bad things, and so we started to remember, one of the things inside our movement was to really check people out. What they say, who they are. Is like in one of the actions we did in Tahiti, this woman said, a Māori woman came, because we met people from all around the world. She said she was from Tūhoi. I said, oh, Peona Tame. And she said, who? She said, Tameiti. And she said, oh, I don't know him. I thought, do you know what I mean? So that was another angle for us. And, calling stuff out is just whatever. But inside our movement is that we were tight. that you had to be tight, you had to rely on each other. But even like Hone said, we didn't have a lot of resources. We had nothing. So even like Panak, you know, we've handed over our logbooks. We'd write everything we did down. I mean, the amount of work we did, we were young, we were passionate, had a huge impression from Hawaii. And winning over our own at Aotearoa was the hardest part. So, yeah, anyhow. So Hui Oranga was just an attempt to... I realised people don't want to hear from me about the French situation in the Pacific. So in the photo here, you've got Charlie Shing, who was part of one of the independence movements there. And I just want to part out, this is my daughter Te Whenua, who was part of Creative Natives and making music happen. And so all of our kids have been, you know, all come, they don't want to do anything the same way as us. They're going to do it differently. These are Brian LaPost. This is his oldest son. He's a musician. Yeah.
Tell us a bit more about Charlie Chin.
Oh,
The march.
well, you know, well, one of the things I found is that it's a bit like Māori politics. You've got lots of independence movements and even in Hawaii, I don't want to get into it, but that we all have differing ways of seeing how we can achieve something. We all have the same kind of end goal sometimes. We just want to do it different ways. And unity is really necessary, but a hard thing to build. So, yeah. But Charlie was very key in bringing that to the forefront of everyone.
Where was Charlie from?
Tahiti,
From Tahiti. Oh, right.
in his relation.
Oh.
He burned a French flag in front of the French consul.
Oh, he did all kinds of crazy stuff. So you're talking about innovative stuff. I don't know whether it was him or Guy Tairo. In Wellington, you know, they went through some rotten fish in front of the French consulate, and that was like, whoa. But, you know, that signalled a real... and then Charlie went and burnt the French flag at another action. So, you know, lots of little actions were done, and he wasn't scared.
Are there any other aspects to, or like ways in which this history is remembered that you think miss, or what else is missing from the way the movement is remembered? Any of you, right?
Well, I woke up early this morning and
Thankfully.
lay in bed and thought, where is the burial mat that I brought back from Vanuatu? Because I'd been to the burial of Walter Lini,
Oh, yeah.
and I've got it somewhere. In fact, I've got a couple of those mats. They made hundreds of them, and they wrapped Walter Lini's body in those mats, and before they buried him. And that got me thinking about Mandela, and you two going up to make sure you were there for his burial. And the funny kind of conversations we had on the phone as you travelled up, and you wanted to find me any contacts I had there. And how marvellous it was that you both were able to be at his burial. And I still remember seeing the tiny speck in the sky of the aeroplane taking his body away from the funeral to go back to be with his ancestors.
Yeah, yeah.
And every time I think about it, I'm deeply moved by it, because it sort of says something about life and death and all of that. If anyone's thought, just...
I have a question.
Mhm.
What is the Māori challenge to the myth of a nuclear-free New Zealand? And Connie and Hilda? And Reverend George, how did you take up that challenge?
Like the myth now or the myth then?
Both, because I think it's the same.
It's really just your fellow's job to expose it. And then everybody else's job to build capacity around doing something to change it. You know what I mean? Like at the moment, people don't even truly understand that it's a myth. You know, how upset we are that we're not part of AUKUS, God's sake, and how we're trying to slide in on this non-nuclear thing. You know, just absolute rubbish. It's a nuclear pact, and anything we have to do with it connects us to it. So, one is to expose, and two is to build action around getting it changed. I think that's what it is. It's not just enough to know about it. It's about building action to change it. That's something for young people to work. While we're at home looking after the mokapunas.
I think it's about writing the history too, the correct history in and others, and because there's a lot of, I call it whitewashed information that doesn't even reflect what actually happened, even about our struggle. Like I see the Crown is writing up about the history of the Māori flag, and I keep updating an article because, well, anyhow, you know, but it's about when you look for information, each year it's getting more and more watered down. Palatable, and it doesn't even look like the truth. And so that's why I think we have to tell our own stories and package them, and like in schools, no matter what it is. So I'm a real firm believer, and I think I got that from our, Ranginui Walker and co, who, he used to say, write your own story. So that's the story that comes to the fore, not a... I've noticed it in Google that each year it's sort of getting watered down and less is there, and this is what's put up and this other stuff is put to the side. And I think that's the job of activists, is to get our stories out there. So that's what for some people, and like what Hone was talking about, kids will remember action. But it's also about dilemmas. How do they deal with dilemmas? Because what happens if your uncle is the reverend who says you can't do this and you can't do that? What's the way around it? When somebody who's very authoritarian in your community says, no, we don't do things like that, and then they, we've all got that. We've got people who say, ka kaua e mahi tira. Our position is that way when really you want to go that way. So, yeah, it's about putting out, ways to do it and being safe for your group and your actions. Keeping yourself safe.
Well, thank you for introducing AUKUS into the kōrero hone. I think one of the dangers of teaching this history is teaching it as like a dead history, instead of like connecting it to contemporary issues and the ongoing nuclear colonialism that the Pacific faces. I have an announcement to make. We're launching our petition against AUKUS today, so that'll we'll do that. We'll announce that as well at our commemoration for the Rainbow Warrior later this afternoon. So I think if we can, we've got Ella, she's our TikTok queen. We'll do a TikTok about AUKUS for the children, and hopefully we'll be able to.
Yeah, that's how they get it, eh?
Yeah,
That's how
The kids get it on TikTok.
Even adults.
Yeah, but I'd like to open it up to see if there are
What's
any.
TikTok, George?
Yeah.
Because I don't.
But yeah, I was wondering if anyone here today has any questions for our esteemed panel.
Who was at that voice, so
Yeah.
I'm actually quite, touched to see him. Especially since, that through meeting yourself and other activists, I've come to know my own uncle because he's died when I was quite young, in '96. But my question was around around how the nuclear-free part of the thing has overshadowed the independent part, and how do you think that we can actually elevate the independence part without obviously letting go of the nuclear-free stuff as well? Like, how do we also really push for that? How do you think we push for that stuff?
That was the big change in 1980. And the connection that we could see as Indigenous people was land and sea, whereas other people thought about health. That there was a threat to humanity, and there was a threat to health, and a threat to everybody's well-being. But actually, no one gave a shit about Indigenous lands and wana, and language. So it wasn't until we heard everybody's stories that we realised, holy heck. So that's why independence was asserted, and it wasn't taken very well. And but anyhow, and I think it took some people a long time, but for us as Indigenous people, it was just made sense. And for others, it was like, well, I'm doing such a good job, and I've got to do this, and everyone's got a different audience, and that's what I mean. We had to come to some way of agreeing. And one of my somethings I wrote, I thought, I don't want to go to any more movements where I'm expected to be the anti-racism educator, the treaty educator, that I have all the answers about how to solve all the Māori problems. I actually just want to be involved in that, and then, I can remember being asked as a 24-year-old, like, how do we solve the treaty issue? And like, I remember yelling back at people because I didn't know the frickin' answers. I've just become a councillor up in the far north, and I'm just thinking, oh my God, we as a community. I thought I was switched on, but I'm pretty kuare about all the things that happen that, we get locked out of, shut out of, where we don't even, like from footpaths to potholes to whatever, that we just left out of it. Where there's no conscious education. In becoming a councillor now, I think about what all the councillors did in Manukau City Council 30, 40 years ago, just making green spaces in Otara. That we haven't even got to up north. But what was the point of that? Sorry. So anyhow, so independence became... it's no point, like I would see it. People would come to Aotearoa, they'd do a take about an international thing that concerned most New Zealanders. But no, the audience had no connection to Bastia Point or Raglan or Māori issues. It was like, oh yeah, those are just our stuff. But no, But we as Indigenous people connected. So, there was a big fight getting independence, and a lot of people didn't agree with it and didn't get involved with it. So, and that's the way it was, and that's the way it is. No drama, just... but I would say that... Oh, and then there'd be other dynamics, that we were unchristian. Part of the decolonisation is our spiritual beliefs as well. And that's everybody's whakapono is their own whakapono. But you know, those all of the parts of like in a lot of ways, I have this little view that Christianity helped us in one way, but it also disabled us in another way. And that part of decolonisation is reclaiming the things that are useful, beneficial to Indigenous peoples, which are at odds with the coloniser. And that's why I talk about Kaikwhiria. And, you know, anyhow. So getting independence involved in the nuclear-free stuff was quite a struggle. And also cultural tikanga from Māori, from other Pacific Island people who also said Māori Hawaiians, Tahitians, and Aboriginals deserved what they got. But that was just little games, you know, that, you know, it was part of the whole colonisation. You deserve what you got because you weren't smart, you weren't clever, you let it happen, you let it go. But, you know, such is life.
I'd just like to comment. I have a paper here that I sent Mai and Marco this week, just talking about that kind of tension, and debate between those two issues. And he made the point that the movements in both Pacific and Europe started at about the same time, but the people in Europe were very centred in that because theirs was the place where explain the impact that was on having Pacific. So it would take these other sources to what they didn't But I agree with you, it has to be we have to turn out really good quality resources for this generation. Because even in the curriculum at the moment, I haven't seen mention of the nuclear arms issue in the new history curriculum. I haven't seen the word nuclear appear anywhere. And we say this is an important part of our identity, but I think that's another way of kind of visibilising it. And that, where is it going to be taught? At which year level is it going to be taught? If it's going to be mentioned, is it going to be just up to individual teachers in each high school? Oh, shall we teach this or shall we not? Rather than part of the mandatory curriculum for everybody. So I think we've got to work hard with that. So glad that this is happening today.
It might also be about calling together, you know, the whole brigade, like you guys. Not a someone. No, because there's a lot of people who were involved in things back then who are now really quite well known, quite important about you guys collectively calling for it to be, you know, put into the curriculum. That history is a huge part of who we are today. And, you know, it's known all over the world, even though erroneously, but, you know, get that. One of the ways to do that is to, you know, bring together, what do they call those groups? Really important people groups. You know what I mean? And have them publicly call for it to be included in the curriculum. Nuclear free and independent Pacific. And just on that, tāwhana's, you know, connection, everybody's connection, doesn't matter what age, tāwhana and them, you know, being out on the sea on the fleet of 7, the Wakahaurua. And the fact that Dieter, the German millionaire, who actually paid for them, one of the things he wanted to have them be part of was, you know, fighting against the nuclearization of the Pacific, fighting against the windback exercises, particularly up at Kaho'olawe and all around the Pacific. And so They've all now gone off to be other things. Be really good if we could get them back into the game, because they are a living and travelling reminder of that history. Be great to have that back. But Eminent Person School, that's what they call it. Murray, George, David, Hilda, you fellas would all qualify as being party to that. If bring all of the other ones together, we're part of that, and just a simple call, to make it part of our upbringing. Anyway.
You build your waka, I'll sell it. You build your waka, I'll sell it for you.
Get it right on that one, buddy.
Another thing I'd like to raise, since we're in the museum, is I hope we get a chance to go and look at the exhibition on the nuclear issue here, which is very tiny, almost invisible. But this museum has Jill Hanley's entire collection of photographs. Not one of them is exhibited for the public to see. So I hope we all get the chance to go and look at that and discuss that, because this is one of the places that school kids at Konga will come to learn, and at the moment it's not exhibiting that very well.
And as for teachers, it's good to write, assessment standards that can draw out, get kids to research these things and connect on a personal level. So, I've developed things on for tikanga aiwi, he whakaputanga, te tiriti o Waitangi. Gosh, one was about the history of te reo, because, kura kaupapa might be 33 or so years old, but actually children don't know that there was even a fight for te reo, and that it is a continued fight for te reo. And then the last one I did out of 4 assessments was te taiao, where they had to look at issues about, and had to even ask them to find out about, a whole list of things that they didn't even have in their vocab or in their knowledge, like 1080, whatever. Why is Greenpeace against Coke bottles, single-use Coke bottles? But, kids are, so we've got to have good assessments for kids that are meaningful to them, but help them find out stuff they didn't know. And I saw kids in Kaitai had a climate action protest one day, but it was at 3 o'clock. It was a stupid time for the teachers to help support them, because our kids all catch buses. There's no way they're going to be at maybe they went, I don't know, but I know none of our kids would have gone because they wouldn't have got a ride home. So, whatever. So, sorry, maybe on.